Hi everybody, this video is going to talk about how to do a linear regression on your graphing calculator. We're going to use the bouncing ball activity to do this. There are a couple things you need to have with you so we can get started. One thing is you need to have this table with your data on it. Another thing is you need to have your calculator. And the third thing, on this paper, on the PDF, the next page of the PDF has instructions. You need those instructions. So have those three things with you, whether they're printed out or on your screen or something. Have your calculator, these instructions, and the table of values. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. If you look at these instructions, the first thing to do is to turn on your diagnostics. And actually, I'm going to take a step back even before that. If you have your own calculator that you bought at the store and nobody has ever used, this first step that I'm going to talk about does not apply to you. You can probably skip forward about a minute in the video. If you are borrowing a calculator either from the school or even more importantly, maybe from a sibling or something like that, then you need to follow this next step. And the next step is to clear out your memory. Because if you bought it online from some random person or as you're borrowing it or whatever, you don't know what's on that calculator. And a lot of times, whatever's on that calculator could possibly mess you up. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear out our memory on our calculator. There are a couple ways to do that. I think the best way is to go to the second button on your calculator. And then down here by the plus, there's a memory. Do you see up above there? So I want second memory or plus. I'm going to reset. I'm going to do a memory reset. So I'm going to push the 7 because that's the reset. It asks me what I want to reset. I'm going to go all the way over to all, and I'm going to hit all. Now, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to reset all of mine, but it'll ask you, are you sure? And you'll say yes, and then it'll take a little bit for it to kind of chug through and clear everything out. All right, once you have it cleared out, now we're ready for step 1 on this page. So everybody now, regardless of what kind of a calculator you are, we are going to do this. This is a one-time only thing. We only have to do it once, and unless you run out of batteries or take out the batteries or something like that, that would reset it again. So now that we are with a blank slate, we're going to do this turn on the diagnostics. I'm going to click quit out of this menu because I don't need this. And to quit out of almost anything, you do second quit. Second quit will get you out of pretty much anywhere. All right, we need to turn on our diagnostics. To do that, we have to go to second catalog and scroll down. So let me show you. Once again, the second button is right here. We're going to go to second. The catalog button is the 0. So we have second 0, which is catalog. We have to scroll down to the word diagnostic. They are in alphabetical order. I think the easiest way is just to hold down your down button on your scroller, your cursor, whatever, and go all the way down to the D's. Once you get down to where it says diagnostic on, and this little triangle is right next to diagnostic on, you hit enter, and it says on, but it hasn't actually done it yet, so you have to hit enter again, and now it says done. That means it's done. We only have to do that one time, so we are now done with that step. So now I'm going to go on to the second step. Next step is to turn on our plots. To do that, you go to the y equals and then arrow up. Okay, y equals. On your calculator, your y equals button is right up here in the upper left-hand corner. We go to the y equals button. Then you take your cursor and you arrow up to where it says plot 1 and you hit enter. You go to the right and you hit enter and then you come down off of it. And then to know if they're on, they're highlighted in black. Okay, so that means that they are on. We have those on when we're doing scatter plots. And that's what we're doing right now. We're doing a scatter plot, so we're going to have them on. If we were doing normal graphing, like just graphing a line, we would want to go turn those off. So you only have the plots on when you're doing a scatter plot. All right, we have done step 1. We have done step 2. We are ready to go on to step 3, which is to enter our data. So we need to go and look, well, let's get this set up and then we'll look at our table. Let's go to Stat, Edit. So over here, there's a Stat button. And in that menu, we're going to choose Edit. So we hit Enter. And we have a table. Your tables should be empty. If they are not empty, you want to arrow up to the L2. I'm actually going to do it on the L1. You want to arrow up to whichever one you want to get to. and you hit clear. And here's your clear button. And then you go down, and now it's cleared out. So that's how you clear them. If you have things in there, you want to clear it out. You shouldn't have anything in there because either your calculator is brand new or we just cleared it out a second ago. So you shouldn't have anything in there. But if you do, that's how you clear it out. Okay, our L1 is like our X column. Our L2 is like our Y column. So if I go over to my table, and in this table, this first column, the initial height, those were my X's. And then these two were both of my Y's. And so on my calculator, what I want to do is I'm going to plug in the numbers 50, 50, and then 100, 100, 150, 150, 200, 200. The reason I'm doubling it is because I have a 50 that goes with a 40, and I have another 50 that goes with a 35. So I need both of those in there. So now I'm going to go to my Y column, which is my L2, and I'm going to put in the numbers from this table into my calculator. Now, these are the numbers that I have. Your numbers are probably different. You can use yours, or if you'd rather just use mine so you're following along with the video, that's okay too. So you've got your 50, 100, 150, 200. Now you're going to put these numbers into your L2, whatever the numbers are from your table. Okay, so we are here on step 3. We entered our data. We used L1 for the X's and L2 for the Y's, did that. Now we can see our scatter plot. To do that, we're going to go to Zoom 9. The Zoom button is up here at the very top. In the middle, we go to Zoom. When you choose Zoom, you're telling your calculator where you want it to look. Do you want it to have an XY axis in the middle? Do you want it to count to 1,000? What do you want to do with it? So we're going to choose Zoom Stat, which is the 9th one down. You can either arrow down or just click 9. And that plots our scatter plot for us. Notice, like we had on our table, on our paper, we have 2 points on top of each other on each of these. Okay, so we watched and we saw our scatter plot, did that. Step 5. To draw the line, go to Stat, Calc, scroll down, go to number 4, Linear Regression, and then scroll down from there, go to Store Equation. Okay, I'm going to walk us through these steps. So you go to Stat, and then you arrow over to Calc. And you want to go down to number 4. Number 4 says Linear Regression. It says AX plus B. That's like Y equals MX plus B. They just call it AX plus B. So we're going to choose 4. You can arrow down, or you can just hit 4. And you get this list. You want in this list the L1, because we talked about that, those are our X's, the L2s to make our Y's. Frequency, we're not going to bother with. Store equation, we do need this. Here, we're going to go to vars, arrow over, Y vars, enter for Y1. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a second. And the reason I'm pausing here is when you get to store equation, some older models need to do L1, L2. Let me show you where to do that. You go to second 1. See how the 1 has the L1 up above it? So you go to second L1, and then the comma, which is above the 7, and then second L2, and then you're ready to join with the rest of us. So now you do the vars like we just did. I'll do that again. You go to vars, Y vars, Y function, Y sub 1, and now that should be there. If you have an older model, your calculator might look a little bit different on this menu, but you should come up in just a second to get the same numbers we get. Okay, so to store the equation, vars, Y vars, function, Y1. Okay, so what we just did here is we are now storing the equation in the Y equals button so that we still have it. Okay, let's arrow down to calculate. Oops. Arrow down to calculate and hit enter. Now, when we get to this screen, we want to write these numbers down. And the reason is because it kind of took a lot of strokes, like buttons, to get there. So let's go ahead and write this stuff down. It's really not difficult, but it takes a lot of keystrokes to get back to this screen. So let's go ahead and write them down now. Okay, once I have them written down, I'm ready to go on to the next step. So I did that. I stored the equation. We want to see the line, so we're going to go to graph. On step 7, we could go to graph or we could go to zoom stat, either one. Because we already went to zoom stat once, that's the zoom level it's set at, and it's not going to leave that until we tell it, so we could just go straight to graph. When we go to graph, there's something I want to show you. Up by the battery icon, there's going to be like a little loading circle. And so when your calculator is like thinking about things, you'll have that loading circle and you'll just know that you need to wait. So I'm going to go to graph. Do you see that little loading? And it's drawing the line for me. Okay, there is my line. I have my line drawn and I know the equation. Step 8 over here, to see the equation, you go to the y equals button. So I'm going to go to my y equals button. And look, these are the exact same numbers I wrote down over on my paper. 0.628, 10.75. Those are the same numbers. I'm ready to write some of this down on my paper. Okay, that equation from our calculator, we're going to write that down on step 4 in our worksheet here. So enter the table into your graphing calculator, did that. Use linear regression instructions, did that to find the equation of the trend line. Here is the equation of the trend line. Write that down in that blank for number 4. There's also a question here about the correlation coefficient R. The correlation coefficient, and this is what does this number signify? The correlation coefficient tells us how closely the data fits the line. The R number that we had, let's go back and see what we wrote down. Okay, I'm going to have them written down here because it's actually asking for that here in this blank. What is the correlation coefficient R for the equation the calculator generated? We will usually use the R squared. I know I wrote R here, but let's just call that R squared. So our R squared value is 0.973. What does this number signify? It tells us how closely the data fits the line. Let me talk about that a little bit. Okay, I have a couple of examples and I just made these up, so they're not going to be perfect. But the R squared value tells us how closely the points fit the line, or how closely the line fits the points. And if it's a 1.0, that's perfect. It's like 100%. It got all exactly on there. That is an R squared of 1.0. You also could have a negative. The negative actually shows us the slope. And so these are all exactly on there. And it's going down, so it's a negative 1. It's, again, 100%. It's just a negative slope. A 0.7 might be something like this. A 0.2, everywhere. A negative, because it's going downwards, 0.4 might be something like this. So these are just some examples. And again, I just made up these examples. They're not the greatest examples. But just to show you what the correlation coefficient is. If it's 100% on the line, it's like this. If it's barely on the line, it's like this. And so what we have here shows us ours is really high, 0.973. That is almost exactly on that line. And if we look at our calculator, we can see that on our calculator. Look how closely those fit the line. They're all almost touching, if not definitely touching. Like they are really, really close to the line. That's why the correlation coefficient is so high. A 0.973 is very high. That is how you do a linear regression on your calculator. Linear regressions are helpful because they help us fit a line to a scatter plot. And the scatter plot might not be an exact line, but the calculator says instead of just using your ruler to try to fit something, let's do it a little bit more mathematically. So your calculator does that for you, comes up with a great line of regression, a trend line, so you can make some predictions based on what your trend line says. We will continue to work on this in class next time.